Hi, and welcome to Studio 411. I'm your host, Larry Dasilva. Well, we have quite a interesting show today. We're take a little flight, you might say. Our guest is an author, a first-time author, Erika Armstrong, Erika with a K. With 25 years in the aviation industry, Erika has experience in every aspect of aviation, from the front desk of a fixed base operations to the captain's seat of commercial and corporate aircraft. Erika has had the best view in the world. She's currently an award-winning staff writer for such publications as Colorado Serenity magazine, and her professional pilot columns can also be found in various publications such as Disciples of Flight, NYC Aviation, and also Erika owns her own company, Leading Edge Aviation. The book, A Chick in the Cockpit, and again, it's my life up in the air, and believe me, I was halfway through it until I realized, wait a minute, my life in the air, it's up in the air. It's more than just up in flight, as she'll tell us again with a fascinating story. So ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard your flight. And joining us here on Studio 411, Erika Armstrong. Hi, Erika. How are you?
Hi, Larry. Great.
All right, Erika, as we always start off with authors, when did you decide to write the book?
I started it would be about 7 years ago. The idea was out there. As you know, with all of your other authors, it takes quite a few years to actually get through the publishing process, but it's still about 7 years ago, and it took a couple years to get it written and put in the format so I could pitch it to author or to agents, and it took a while for the agent to pitch it to publishers. So it was a good 3-year process to get through the whole thing.
Absolutely. I read in one of your blogs, it was from the point where you kind of thought, oh, it would be ready to go, and then it was still another year before all the editing was done. So it is quite a process, and one, I guess, just has to be patient and keep on dotting all the I's and crossing all the T's.
Absolutely. Patience is the key here.
There you go. And I'm remiss in saying, again, The Chick in the Cockpit by Erika Armstrong, Beeler Publications. And for more information, Erika's website, achickinthecockpit.com, www.achickinthecockpit, just like the book.com. All right. When I was a kid, Amelia Earhart was an aviation pioneer. I wasn't around for Amelia, but I mean, I remember hearing about it, of course, on history programs and biographical programs, and of course, I said, wow, that's pretty cool. Is she? And I want to say, I think one other woman who might have been a French pilot, but I wouldn't swear to it, did so much in the 20s and 30s, of course, before Amelia's untimely and mysterious passing. So knowing that as a kid growing up, I was like, well, when the book came, my way, and I heard your story, I thought, what's the fuss about a woman flying a Boeing 727? So I posed that to you. Where did the title of the book originate, and why such a fuss when we already had such trailblazers such as Ms. Earhart?
Well, I'm glad it is a fuss, and I want this to be the last book about a woman pilot, because I don't want it to be a big deal anymore. Just put in perspective, I think the next generation is going to grow up like that. I have 2 daughters. When my oldest daughter was 5 years old, we were standing in the grocery store and weighing our big pile of groceries in our cart, and there was a gentleman behind me who had his uniform on. He had his epaulet, the bars pulled off, but I knew he was a pilot, and he was behind me. So I told my daughter, I said, let's let this gentleman go ahead of us. She said, well, how do you know that? And I said, well, he's a pilot. And so he smiled, and he went ahead, and my daughter looked at me funny. She said, well, but Mommy, she said, do they let daddies be pilots too? So she's growing up with that perspective that it's no big deal that women are running for president or being airline pilots. But unfortunately, there's still a transition era. It took a few generations to get that idea into people's minds that it doesn't matter who's flying the airplane. The airplane doesn't care. As long as I can do it, anyone can do it.
There you go. You co-dedicated the book to your dad. Talk about the role he played in becoming who you are, because I saw that, and then of course I got a feeling as I read the book that at times you and some of your immediate family were not exactly close, either in proximity or in contact with each other. So I thought, okay, well, let me ask her. Tell me, growing up, you're adopted, correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
And then my parents, the parents that adopted me, they split up when I was about 7.
Gotcha.
So my dad wasn't in my life a whole lot. Actually, the several years went by. We really only saw each other maybe at Christmas. So we didn't kind of reconnect again until college. And then I had my career, and I was off and busy again. And, you know, we just had grown apart again. But once I had children and ran into some difficulty later on in my life, he stepped up and helped me out every step of the way. So I tease him that he's the best delayed parenthood that there ever is.
So this one in the dedication is your biological father?
My adopted father.
Oh, adopted father. Okay, gotcha.
Yeah,
All right,
yeah.
very good.
Yeah.
Now, so you talked about as a kid, I thought I understood that you wanted to be a veterinarian when you were growing up. So I see there's an animal in the background, but I don't think you're practicing on him, or her for that matter. So again, was that just kind of a kindergarten kind of a vision, and then how did you transition to then falling in love with the aerospace or aviation, I should say, industries?
Yeah. Well, so I grew up in Minnesota, and surrounded by animals and cows and horses, and I think tons of women have that dream of becoming a vet, but then I found out it's chemistry and biology, and you don't get to just go pet the animals and get paid. So I kind of diverted off of that course, but still yet not ever wanting to become a pilot. Even through high school, even in college, I never once thought about becoming a pilot. Of course, I'd look up and say, wouldn't that be cool? But I was working 2 jobs in college, and I still couldn't pay the rent and pay my tuition. So there was a job open at a little airport called Flying Cloud Airport, just southwest of Minneapolis. And the only reason I took the job was because it fit in with my schedule. So still had no intention of becoming a pilot, and got my first job there working behind the front desk, just helping the pilots and customers in and out, but learning the industry from the backside. That's how it began. And at night, when all the regular suit employees went home, the line guys would sit and talk about their flying lessons and all their experiences, and I would sit and listen and still not thinking I could do it. And then I would start helping them study for their tests, and I would, quiz them and ask them questions. And it got to the point where I was actually answering the questions for them and explaining the answers for them. And it dawned on me that I really could learn this stuff just as easily as they could. And it just took that moment where I was able to change my perspective to think that I could do it. Mm-hmm. Where all of a sudden I just a rush of joy thinking that I really could go out and learn how to do this. So I started flying lessons next door and never looked back from that day on.
So basically, you kind of fell into it or stumbled into an aviation career through what you just said. So interesting. You talk in the book about what it takes to be a pilot. Tell us a little about that.
Well, first I want to say, because I'm teaching again this fall, I'm a professor down at Metro State down in Denver. We're teaching aviation. I try to tell my students there's nothing here you can't learn. When you first start studying, it feels overwhelming. There's so much information, but if you break it down and take one little step at a time, there's nothing you can't learn. So it's common sense. I know everyone's fearful of the math and trying to get through that, but it's just common sense and applying that, and learning how to do weight balance. Everything's in formulas for you, so it's very logical. So first year aviation fundamentals is I teach them information that's a mile wide and about an inch deep, so a lot of everything just to get them started.
You talked in the book about aviation is a secret society. Elaborate on that a little bit. Is that like saying it's a men's club, or is it even more than that?
It's even more than that. I tease my friends because I can usually pick out a pilot in a crowd. I think it's one of those unique careers that, just going up and being in, of course, my dogs just came in.
There you go. There we go. Right on cue, Erika.
And knowing that, I'll get them out in a second here.
Right on cue.
you're the only person that's going to get that airplane back down on the ground again. It's a daunting feeling, and it's a self-confidence builder. You need to have a little bit to do it in the first place, but it certainly builds on that as you move through your career.
There we go. And while I'm looking something up, what is the name of our surprise guest?
Sorry, I've got Gracie and Luna, who I call Lunatic. So she's new to the family, and
there you go.
I had them locked up upstairs, but my dog knows how to open up doors.
There you go. Well, good. We'll put them to work here in our production studio. So
I might.
Oh my goodness! You mentioned airline deregulation in 1978. Talk about how things were and how they became. Now, I know some of that was pre you getting involved in aviation, but that brought up like images and memories of during the early Reagan presidential years, early 80s, the air traffic people went out on strike, and then I saw this deregulation in 78. So even in that period of time, there was a lot of changes going on. Again, how were things pre-78, and then how are they now? Because I know there's a lot of computers on the fritz too, not just ours.
Yeah, we just saw that with Delta the other day. Just the ideology of aviation and the industry had to change. Before deregulation, the government would subsidize routes, so small towns would be able to have commuter service come in and out of there, even if it's just 1 or 2 passengers. It was subsidized so that they would have that. But once deregulation started, it was pure capitalism. So if a route didn't work, then they obviously would cancel that. So there's a lot of communities still in the United States that are not serviced. But it also changed the philosophy of airline management, where everything is lean and mean, and every seat needs to be filled. I think 9/11, of course, really turned it around. So everybody notices that the airplanes are oversold. They're packing them in. They're putting in extra rows of seats, which changes the passenger experience, of course. So it used to be a very glamorous thing to do. Airline travel was about getting dressed up and traveling the world and having fancy meals and champagne on board. And now it's you pay for your luggage to come with you, and there's no meals, and you pay for your soda. So, I think they overshot the destination as far as that goes, and I hope they can find a balance again. Unfortunately, we're only down to just a few majors, so there's really no need for any of them to have to change the platform. So
And
hopefully somebody will step up and say, hey, let's try something different here and offer a happy medium somewhere.
And oil is down, so of course they're making more money because they're not having to jack up fares even higher, or so you would think, but sometimes they still do. So they're reaping quite a bit of money, and again, it's I guess there's nothing you can do. I know there's been some bills looking to be presented in Congress about limiting the curbing the seats even more. I mean, this seat I'm sitting in is actually more roomier than an airline seat. So, it's a little tough, especially if you're a large person or a tall person, to be comfortable on a flight, because you certainly are paying a lot of money to be on those planes. So, very good.
Yeah.
Erika Armstrong joining us for the hour here on Studio 411. The book, A Chick in the Cockpit, My Life in the Air. Beeler Publications. For more information, achickinthecockpit.com. Lee Woodruff, New York Times bestselling author, quote said about the book, a fascinating glimpse into Erika's captivatingly unexpected turbulence in a world where men still rule. And certainly that is an understatement to say the least, especially with what we will talk about throughout the hour. You state in the book about the current and future pilot pool is getting leaner while the pay and benefits may not be keeping up with the demand. So that's a little troubling given the urgency and the importance of having skilled people up in the air.
Yeah, absolutely, and it even spills over into the air traffic control field too. There's a variety of reasons for it. It's not just one particular thing, but we have about 500,000 less licensed pilots right now than we did in 1980. So over the years, the people that have tended to be lured into aviation have gone to other industries, and combine that with this new rule about having qualified pilots now. You need at least 1,500 hours to sit in the right seat of a commuter airplane. It used to be in the olden days, you could get up there with 200 hours, which was not safe either. But it's been definitely difficult for the industry to bridge that gap. It's so very expensive to learn how to fly. At a minimum, $125 an hour. So to put that burden on the pilot to have 1,500 hours before they can get a paying job, where they're only making $24,000 a year, it's a hard package to sell these days. So the industry is slowly learning. A couple of the commuters have actually had to shut down operations because they haven't had pilots to maintain their flight crews. So it'll take a while to get management to change the philosophy, but they'll have to invest a little bit more in the training and first-year bonuses to help those pilots pay back some student loans. Because on top of the flight training, they also want a 4-year degree. So you're looking at 6-figure debt before you're even
absolutely.
out there.
Even more so than quote unquote normal folk that are doing jobs that are not necessarily aviation, legal, medicine, or whatever. The rampant college debt, and then the numbers you're talking about are like almost double or triple what probably the average debt load is being carried now. So that's a major concern, unless you have rich parents.
Exactly.
A quote that I saw, again, many quotes, again, just a fascinating book here, and then we'll get into get away from the flying in a sense. But the flying is always kind of in the structure of the book, but then it gets more into the other parts of being in the air in your life. I found it interesting. There was a woman that was basically a woman discriminating against another woman. And I thought to myself, here you would think women would stick together. And actually, you went through some of that too, where just amazing to me. I kept thinking, are we living in the 19th or the early 20th century? I know there weren't planes then, but just this whole mentality. Even what happened with you, which we'll talk in a little bit about, even with, the authorities and things going on during your marriage. It's just amazing, this old style of thinking, well, if something happens, well, it must be her fault. If something goes wrong with the plane, well, you shouldn't have a woman flying the plane, or even as a flight engineer. I mean, it's amazing, what you included in here that you went through.
Yeah, you definitely can use it as an excuse either way. And I think, the example of my boss, she was, from the previous generation. And but I thought it was ironic that here she was a woman running an aviation company, yet she held the ideals that her corporate clients would not be comfortable with having a woman fly her passengers. So it was a strange balance, but once again, it just took a moment of her to change her perception. Once, out of pure desperation, she finally let me fly because we were truly out of pilots. Just that one trip to see that I could do it, and the passengers were fine with it, and it actually became almost of a sales pitch to say, I've got a woman pilot. So when we started having clients ask for me to fly them, it took that moment for her to realize, okay, this can work, and then I can use it to my advantage to help sell some more flights. So
the light bulb went off, and all of a sudden, ooh, we can make money on this. It's amazing. And you referred to yourself as, quote, the token female at one point.
I was, yeah. The flight department I worked in, flying about Boeing 727, they had Department of Defense contracts, and part of the deal is they had to have a few minorities on their staff, and out of 150 pilots, they threw in one woman so they could check the box on the application saying, yeah, we hire minorities.
Now, you dispel the notion that the landing on a plane is the most dangerous part of the flight. You say, no, that's not the most dangerous. What in your opinion, is?
It's definitely on takeoff. I know everybody always thinks the landing is the scariest. It's the most fun for the pilots, but from your point of view, back there in the airplane, you're watching it pitch and roll and be close to the ground. And don't forget, our perspective is up front. We just look straight out, so passengers are looking at the whole airplane roll around. But on takeoff, your airplane is extremely heavy, depending on where you're going, and you throw in an airport like Denver here, and it's high altitude and hot and heavy. And so when you take off, you have to have everything operating perfectly. And if that engine fails, it's at that time your airplane can still do it, but your pilot has to be really good. So that's the trickiest part, where everything has to go perfectly in the emergency to do what you want it to do.
Erika Armstrong joining us for the hour. A Chick in the Cockpit, My Life Up in the Air. Beeler Publications. For more information, www.achickinthecockpit.com. One of the cool things at the beginning of each chapter, in addition to kind of a checklist that you list leading into your experiences in life, is also where you, unfortunately, they're kind of tragic in nature, but I think it shows the importance of your profession, as some of the major disasters of the last 30, 35 years. And I found it fascinating because sadly I remembered many of them. So, it's kind of like, as a lead into whatever point in your life that you're talking about. But, and unfortunately they keep happening. And of course now it's taken on a new twist, because now it's not always mechanical error. There are planes disappearing, and some of it could be other factors, we'll call it, that are leading to these disasters. But back in your day, it really was more mechanical or pilot error.
Yeah, and unfortunately, aviation has to learn from its mistakes, and of course there have been a few. And each time it happens, we learn such an enormous amount of information. So every time we went into the simulator, we would go through all those major accidents, and we would be put in the exact same scenario, and now they know how to train and what to do about it. And so from all of those accidents, thousands of lives have been saved. It's gotten to the point where simulators are so good, they can truly replicate, I'd say, about 80% of what you could out there. And you can't go out and take a new A380 and roll it around in real life. Well, you could, but you can get the sim and run it through all its paces, and shut off all the engines and see how you do. And to be able to do that from here on out, aviation is incredibly safe, astronomically safe. I think we can get to the point where we're still going to have a few incidents and accidents, but maybe not life-taking accidents.
Right.
There'll always be flat tires and landing gears that don't work, but hopefully we can keep it down to a more of incident category.
Does being a captain, not necessarily yourself, but in general, does being a captain mean one is a good leader?
Not necessarily. In the airlines, it's based on seniority numbers. You got to know how to fly, but you also, you have a seniority number. When your number's up, if you can pass the check ride, you can sit in that captain's seat. So having a bad captain is actually a great way to learn how to be a good captain. One good thing about being on reserve and flying with a different flight crew almost every single time you go flying is that you see all the different dynamics, all the good captains, the bad captains. You learn what works. And especially in a Boeing 727, where there's 3 pilots up there, they don't have that anymore. It's two pilot crews. So to work in an environment where there was actually 3 pilots, especially when I was a flight engineer, and I could watch that communication, that dialogue, and watch those captains that were jerks, and understand all the difficulties that they actually had to go through because your crew didn't want to work with them. So I realized it would be a lot easier just to be a good captain than one of these guys that has to fight their way through everything.
There you go. Erika Armstrong, A Chick in the Cockpit, My Life Up in the Air. And I mention that because now we're going to transition, and we'll draw 9/11, the tragic events there, as kind of a barometer. Post 9/11, your career is continuing, and then life starts to take a series of twists and turns, which again is also the second kind of half of the book to some degree, maybe about 60% of the book actually. But again, I'm just running through these real quick, because we could talk for hours about the what went on during this 10+ year period. Injured in a horse accident, got married. So I don't know which was worse, the horse accident or whatever. But anyway, that's just a little joke. Bought a house, so that's good. Got pregnant, okay?
Yes.
And flew until you were 8 months pregnant. My good, could you even control the stick? My goodness, you must have not shown much, because I don't know. Otherwise, I don't know how you would have landed the plane. That would have been tough.
Thankfully, I'm I'm very tall, so I was able to hide it. So I didn't look so bad. And over the winter time, I got to wear a big aviation sweater and, my suit coat. So I was able to hide it for a while. So, but definitely had to push that seat back a little bit.
There you go.
And that's one of the problems that women are facing in aviation is we kind of have to go out on maternity leave more than most people because we can't fit out the emergency exit until after about 6 months. So the industry is still learning how to deal with that, and the pilots themselves are still trying to figure out, what's acceptable and what's
Sure.
not.
Yeah. And I just thought of this. What is the ratio using 100% as a max number? Pilots, to best of your knowledge, male and female. What's the ratio? 80-20?
Yeah, of the airlines, 6% of the airline pilots are women.
So
we're looking
so
at
even
94% are still men.
Okay, all right, gotcha. So yeah, a lot of change, and as you said, there could be very many reasons. Certainly the lifestyle, the scheduling, et cetera, et cetera. Anyway, we got pregnant. Okay, flying until 8 months. Then we mentioned before you got married, and one thing I mentioned to the viewers, the names in the book are changed to protect the innocent. That old saying. So Erika will refer to him. However, I'll just refer to him as him, just for my sake. But again,
I can think of some names.
Ames, there you go. But then you had a C-section, and then shortly after that, a person that you had sort of worked with was mechanic. I beg your pardon, flight mechanic.
Yes.
After a certain amount of time, then verbal, and then later on physical abuse starts to manifest itself. So certainly very hard to focus on what you need to do in the air, and then knowing, well, I can decompress when I go home. And of course, being a mother is certainly a big undertaking. But then to go through all of this is where then, despite having all your checklists and doing everything just so, never got as much as a traffic ticket, and then all of a sudden the ball starts to slowly unravel.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, so here you go through life, you're a captain on the airliner, you just think there's nothing you can't do or there's nothing you can't fix, and it wasn't just like airplane accidents. It's not just one thing that happens, it's a series of incidents that brings that airplane down to the ground. So same type of thing for me. Once you switch that balance of trying to go from a single independent woman to having a family and bringing children into the mix and trying to create that new balance, and also your partner too has to learn how to deal with that and learn how to do that. So in my particular case, we were going to do a role reversal. I was going to work, and he was going to stay home and be the stay-at-home parent. And it lasted about 4 days. After all that planning, I had gone back to my recurrent training, and about 4 days into it, I got the phone call saying, I just can't do this. It's just too much. It's not what I expected. And so the conversation went to me maybe taking some time away from the airlines, understanding that I was going to go back. And unfortunately, when you leave the airlines, that seniority number, you have to start all over again. It doesn't matter if I had 1 million hours and I was captain for 20 years. If I leave and come back, you have to start all over from the very bottom again. So we had, all the parents out there know what life is like. Your life changes enormously once that first child is born. So as this was happening, also my husband was also revealing some elements of his life that he had kept hidden. I think that was easy to do because I was gone so much, and we really didn't spend an enormous amount of time together. So once all of a sudden we were, I had left my job and home all the time, some of these elements started rising, and definitely had some anger issues that he was not able to control. And so the first part of the book is letting the reader understand all the things you have to go to be a pilot and how you change to become that. So you become this role, and the thought of losing it is beyond your comprehension. So if the airline world, any type of arrest, any type of, anything breaking the law, it goes on your record and it stays on there. So during this transition period, we had an incident where my husband tossed me around pretty good. And I reached out to his mom for some help and didn't get any help from there. But he was very upset that I had called his mom to ask for help. And in retaliation, he thought that was it. He wanted to, end that control and situation. He knew that if he called the police and had me arrested, that I wouldn't be able to go back to work. So it's a short sentence for kind of a long story, kind of culminating everything into one thing. And the book explains it much better. But it's the idea that at that moment of being able to take away somebody's career and change the rest of their life with a phone call. So the last half of the book is trying to come to terms with losing your career and going on forward from there, and then realizing what's truly important and what still can make you happy when what that one thing you thought was going to make you happy for the rest of your life is taken away. So
and at the same time, regaining maybe through turbulence on a plane, in essence, the long road that you had to regain control of your life, because obviously, and again, this is just from one person's opinion from reading the book. It just, a lot of this seemed almost premeditated, I have to tell you. You don't have to answer that, but it just seemed like it was, things were, I mean, the mother-in-law was like, I felt like I was watching Kathy Bates in Misery. You know what I'm saying? It was just a lot of this stuff just seemed like it was not just, perhaps some mental issues or some anxiety issues on the part of your ex-spouse, but just seemed like that it was things being done for a specific purpose. And I must say that, as you can elaborate, as you wish, I mean, everything you built was systematically torn down. And next thing, by the time you were near the end, everything had been signed over or mysteriously changed to, so you had no control over anything. You basically were like one step away from being homeless.
Absolutely, and was so for a little while. And that's something also that is very old-fashioned in that all of the accounts that I had, all my bank accounts that I had from when I was 16 years old, once you're married and you put somebody else on your account, the husband then becomes the primary controller of that account. I mean, who would know that? I didn't know that until I went to, pay for my groceries and I was locked out of my own account. So it was as simple as him walking into the bank, being the man of the account and saying, I need to take her off. And they simply took my name off of access, just simply changing passwords. So I think, abuse goes beyond just the physical, because all, that I could handle. It was everything else that was completely devastating.
Sure.
It was, and there's a ton of women and men out there who have experienced this, and our society still doesn't talk about it a lot. I know the NFL in the last couple of years has brought it to light a little bit, but it's still a taboo topic, and nobody likes to talk about it. But I think it's important for the next generation of kids to learn how to recognize their emotions and understand how to control them. Sometimes it goes beyond their actual mental issues, which I think there was in this case. Mm-hmm. But it's a whole societal change that has to be willing to talk about it, and we need to have more support out there. And understand. Women need to understand that you need to be able to keep control of your finances in some regards. So there's reasons to keep a bank account by yourself, and it goes contrary to being in a relationship because you want to be able to share everything, but you have to be realistic too and understand that there's some things that can happen that you have no idea can happen.
Now, during those times of stress and trauma, because again, as I said earlier, you went through, I beg your pardon, again, the first verbal, then physical, and then the real kicker to me was then it becomes mental abuse, okay? Not just the being incarcerated, really, which later was cleared up to some degree. But again, during those times, did you feel that your pilot training in any way helped you cope, or rather did it provide a false wall of hope in a bad marital situation?
Well, the pilot perspective got me in the bad spot, because I thought that I could fix it. In an airplane, I didn't care if the engines failed. I still believed that I could get that airplane to the ground safely. It didn't matter what happened. I just felt like I could fix it. So during this whole time, I just kept thinking that I could fix it. You know, I can do something to make it right. And looking back now, I realized there was just nothing I could do to fix this. So once I realized that, then I did fall back on the pilot power again, and put, you know, to be able to step back and look at the situation and say, okay, well, what do I have that does work, as opposed to just concentrating on the things that have failed. So I had to, you know, refocus and relook at my life again and say, okay, well, what do I have? What, even though I can't fly, what else can I do? So that perspective brought me to, you know, a wonderful career. I've been writing for aviation magazines and 7 different national aviation magazines, and now I'm a professor teaching it and bringing new aviation students into the aviation world. So it's a wonderful place to be, even though I never expected to be here.
You talk in the book, we're talking with Erika Armstrong, A Chicken the Cockpit, My Life Up in the Air. You talk about a secret society of battered women. Talk a little bit about that.
So the secret society of battered women, I have been contacted by more people that have had stories similar to mine than I could have ever imagined. Even in my own community here, people that I'd known for years have quietly approached me and taken me aside, even in the grocery store, and told me their own stories, which is horrifying for me to realize that this is, you know, going on for so many people, and we don't talk about it. So I hope that women are more willing to reach out and help each other, and to watch for the signs. You know, it's really hard, because if you want to keep it secret, you can definitely keep it secret. I was certainly able to for years. So once again, it's just going to be a societal change that's going to happen over the next generation.
And it's scary to think that, again, as you said, there's still so much of it around, and then go back 50, 100 years, obviously, you know, again, 200 years, and you just wonder, my goodness, what did, again, majority women, in some cases men can be abused too in a bad relationship, but just wonder, you know, how prevalent was this, you know, back in the day? Because back in the colonial days, you know, there's talk about, you know, drinking was more excessive, and certain things that maybe went on that maybe don't happen today. So, you know, you really wonder how prevalent this ongoing problem is, and it's kind of scary. You talk in the book too about the domestic violence anger management classes that you and your ex-spouse went to. The thing that came out in the book to me was there was one where you went to that was suggested by your spouse, and once again, a controlling issue. Again, the woman seemed almost like a little bit of a quack, if you don't mind me saying. And then later on, you went to another person, I believe might have been a male, who then said, "Well, this isn't like your issue. This is a bipolar, anger issues on the part of the spouse." But go back to the first one. I mean, she was telling you the opposite of what your court-ordered anger management domestic violence people were telling you.
Yes, absolutely. And I think, you know, there are a lot of counselors and therapists and psychologists, and we have to remember that each one of those persons comes into that office with their own viewpoint, and they could be extremely different, but as somebody on the receiving end, you really put your faith and trust into that person. But I think it's important for you to step out and, you know, make sure you really think about what they're saying, and if that doesn't feel right, listen to your gut, because in this particular case, the court had given the victim, in this case, he, you know, my husband claimed that he was, free counseling. So he had met with this woman for, you know, a good 10, 11 times before I was brought in. So there was a preconceived notion on her part as to what happened. So just even the very first meeting with her, when I sat down and told her what happened, she kind of stopped and she said, "Well, wait a second, this is not what I've been told." So, you know, we went back and went in together, and finally the truth came out, and he admitted to what had happened. And her perspective on the situation, because he had come in already, was really that she wanted to teach me how to forgive him and to live with this type of behavior. Instead of saying, you know, there is something wrong with this behavior, so let's change him, her point was to change me to learn how to deal with somebody who was abusive. So, you know, she was a sweet, lovely lady, and I wanted to believe her, and I was, you know, a new mom and newly married, and at this point, I didn't have my own job, or I lost my career, so I kind of felt helpless. So when she kind of put the responsibility on me to save the marriage, I stepped up and thought I was doing the right thing. And I can look back now and realize this woman really she understood, or she should have understood, the cycle of violence and how that happens. It's pretty clear. I think with almost all abusive relationships, there is a certain cycle and pattern, even though, the outward behavior is different. There's still a pattern. And she was a licensed psychologist, and she should have known, but she didn't. So I did have it was a marriage counselor who just laid it out there, and she said, no, this behavior is not okay, and you don't have to put up with it. And it was a turning point for me just to have somebody else say, you're absolutely right.
It's it's amazing. I guess it's like anything. There are good mechanics, bad mechanics, or mediocre mechanics. There are good, mediocre lawyers, doctors, and obviously in that profession, there are people, again, that see things a certain way. The one that was kind of either you felt misled or misunderstood, was she in any way kind of like almost like a religious counselor, or no? Because I almost got the feeling like she was like, well, almost like old school. Well, the woman's got to do, almost like become subservient in order to make things better. Or am I misunderstanding where she was going?
No, you nailed it exactly, and that is one of those issues that has been changing with our society, because abuse really was condoned under most religious pretexts. You were allowed to do that, and it was justified in different ways. And I think I look back now, and her own upbringing probably had a role in it. And she would talk about her own parents, how the father was the leader of the house, and he set the rules, and you have to follow the rules. So it definitely trickled into her own type of counseling, and because she was such a lovely woman, I just wanted to believe her, and I was very naive at that point, so I wish I had paid more attention.
I hear you. Erika Armstrong joining us in the remaining moments here on Studio 411, A Chick in the Cockpit, My Life Up in the Air. Beeler Publications. For more information, the website, www.achickinthecockpit.com. Had another child at one point. I hear margaritas were involved, but again, obviously looking back, I mean, it's, two, I believe, well-adjusted, healthy children. But again, I'm sure folks reading the book, I know I did, 3 letters, WHY, exclamation, question mark. Did you think at that point you were going to save the marriage?
I felt at that point that I was still trying. I still had my end goal as to, keep the marriage working, that he was going to be better and not hurt me again. I was still in this counseling with this other woman who, thought that was a part of a good idea to make the family stronger. I don't regret it for 1 second. I know, it in my heart, I probably knew the relationship wasn't going to last, and I didn't care. I still wanted that other child. So, I think there's a lot of women who will understand that intense desire to, have the other child. So, I didn't know what the next day would bring, and I just thought at that moment that's what I wanted for my other daughter, is to have a sister. And thank goodness they're very close, and I'm glad everything happened out the way it did. Sure,
absolutely. No, I totally get it. But at that point, a lot of folks would say, wow, I know I did. I think I nearly dropped the book. It was just like, okay, and they said, well, I just kept on reading, kept on, like you said, kept on my theory in life: keep your head down a little bit and just keep moving forward as best you can. Your ex, forgive me, comes off because throughout all this, again, finances are being drained. You're becoming an unperson, in my opinion. Everything's being changed to where you literally had no control over any financial or portfolio of any kind. Correct?
Absolutely, one by one. And I didn't realize the extent of it, of course, until we go to. We thought we'd be able to do mediation. That didn't go very well. But the first part of mediation is you lay out your financial records for each other, and not realizing, because we had our own business together on the side, trying to deal with some furloughs. So I had started a business on the side. And going through my own business records, I realized that there was a sudden new ghost employee and a number and an account number that I didn't know existed. Well, what had been happening is he had set up an employee account, although it was just him. So he was paying himself off of our payroll. So it had been happening for a while. There were secret accounts, and I was a mom with 2 little kids in diapers, and I wasn't paying attention. I had let go of that airplane control and let someone else fly, and I completely missed all the signals until it was too late.
Major turbulence, Erika.
That was it.
Now, I'll read this next line verbatim. Your ex comes off as a con artist, user, abuser, and not a nice person at all. So I said it, and we'll move on. How have your children dealt with all this? Again, obviously, they're still their dad. Again, how have they coped with it? Again, it's a lot for young ears to process, even at this point in time.
Yeah. Well, and not to give advice to other people, because I've certainly screwed up badly, but even in situations like this, you got to remember that that's still their parents. So even though I didn't want him at all in my life, I still wanted him in their life in a good way. It took a while to get there. We're still working on it. The only thing I ever asked for in court was that he go get counseling. It didn't happen, but, I still wanted the girls to have a relationship, and they do. And the irony of it all is they figure out on their own what's right and what's wrong. So, I never wanted to badmouth them. One of my concerns was bringing this book out and having them, read it. So there's a little buffering that I've tried to put in there because I want them to have a relationship with him. And I think your kids will always figure it out. You don't need to tell them your own opinion.
A couple of great quotes, if I may, from your eldest child. Quote, "Well, I can hear you, Mommy, even if Daddy can't," which I thought was quite telling for a young age. And then the second one, your daughter at one point turned to you and said, "Mom, I think I am a lot like you. Do you think if I'm a lot like you and Dad is so mean to you, does that mean that Dad will be mean to me and not like me either?" And you end the chapter with, "Out of the mouths of babes." I couldn't have said it better.
Absolutely. There's a pure perspective on the world, right? It's unfiltered, and they see it.
Now, I understand the best, we just recently taped a Christmas show that'll be aired later in the year, and I thought of that one, this quote here when I was reading my notes. I said, I bet you I know what Erika's best Christmas present was, and you were served with divorce papers on Christmas Eve.
I was, with all my friends and family around, yes.
And because everything was being controlled, you were actually probably going to do it first, but he ran to the court, and I guess in Colorado, wherever this took place, that it was, a lot easier to do than perhaps back here in the East. And all of a sudden, how thoughtful. Did he wrap it at least? Or?
No, not at all. He should have.
No bow on top, although you probably saw big bows. And yeah, there you go.
Exactly.
In the remaining moments we have, talk a little bit about Divorce Club Warriors. That's a group that you have either started or are very much involved with. Tell the folks about that.
So I live outside of Denver. A large community, but a kind of a mountain community, and there wasn't a lot of support up here. So when I was going through all of this, there wasn't anybody up here to even talk to. And I adore my friends, but it's such a drag to always be talking about it with your friends. And I know it was a drag for them too. So you just wanted to talk to somebody who you didn't have to pay $125 an hour, just someone who understood. And so I promised myself if I got through this okay, that I would start my own group. So I started this group, and all it is just a forum for women who are struggling or even thinking about a divorce to come in and talk and hear other people's perspectives and stories. I think knowledge is power. So for women to know what the choices are, what things that could happen during the divorce, and just trying to figure out the system and the law, it's insane. So to hear other people's experiences can help with their own. So it's just a, open style, free forum, just a meeting at the local community center. But I've heard some wonderful stories and seen some wonderful changes in women. So I hope there's more of them out there like that.
There you go. A woman named Dorothy C. Westby said of Erika, Captain Armstrong's powerful message of keeping sight of ourselves and our own hopes and dreams is a winner. So again, that's quite a compliment to you. Very quickly, because we are wrapping it up here, you've since remarried, another relationship, and again, we'll perhaps get into that another time. I'm sure there'll be another book somewhere down, hopefully a lot less stressful. But real quick before we leave, best flying movie you've ever seen?
Well, I love Always, Richard Dreyfuss,
Okay.
Holly Hunter.
There you
She's
go.
a kick-ass pilot, so I love watching that.
There you go. There you go. And the worst? Any bad aviation movies you ever saw?
None of them have it right. I'll just tell you that.
Okay, very good. Erika Armstrong, we thank you so much for joining us today on Studio 411. Erika's book, Beeler Publications, called A Chick in the Cockpit, My Life Up in the Air, to say the least. And we enjoyed having you on the program, and we hope to have you back on, perhaps on one of our panel discussions. So thanks for joining us, and hang in there with us for a quick second. We thank you for joining us today on Studio 411, and we thank Erika again, and we appreciate everyone joining us today, and we look forward to seeing you next time for another hour of Studio 411. Have a great day.